Hey, what's going on, guys? We're going to do a special episode here of the Crush Live Poker podcast. I did an interview with a long-time subscriber from Philadelphia named Ilya. He wanted to share his story about how he got robbed going back from a casino or a card room in Florida. And you can jump to 13 minutes if you don't want to listen to the sort of story ahead of time. Basically, he got followed back from the island Pompano, which is in Florida. He drove like 30 minutes away in a very nice suburb to grab something to eat late on a Sunday night. Never thought that he ever faced some sort of robbery. And he was robbed in a parking lot of a restaurant in a very nice suburb, like I said, about 30 minutes away. And he called the police. The police did some investigation, got brought back that he was getting scoped out at the casino, that these guys had watched him the night before because he was an out-of-towner, and then was watching him that night as well, and they followed him and they robbed him at gunpoint. So we had the Philadelphia meetup a few weeks ago, and one of the guys, there were two guys that were there that had come in 2014, and we have one of them on here. His name is Ilya, and when I met Ilya for the first time at that time in 2014 in Philadelphia, he was talking about how he was transitioning to playing full time. Well, fast forward almost 10 years later, and I think he has been playing pretty much full time at the Parx for the past 10 years. And Ilya told me when I saw him again at the meetup that he had a story he wanted to tell. And of course, because we love stories on this podcast, and especially anything that might actually help other subscribers, this is actually more about safety. Now, knock on wood, I have heard many people that I know very well have been robbed in different types of scenarios, whether most of the time it was them most of the time it was them being followed home, and the robbery actually happening outside of their house or somewhere in between the casino and their house, and it was somewhat of a setup. I knew another guy, Joey Sal from Ohio, that got robbed in the parking lot of the WSOP that made news a few years ago. And I mean, you got to really be careful and protect yourself out there. Knock on wood, it's actually never happened to me. But Ilya has a story about you were traveling in Florida. Is that right?
Yeah, so here goes the story. I'm going to step through it slowly and in detail because I originally wanted to do a big write-up and post it on 2+2 after it all happened. But then our second kid came along, and then COVID hit, and then I got sidetracked with much more important priorities and never got to it. But I do want to put the story out there because I think it's important for people to know what goes on in South Florida. So this is May of 2019, 3.5 years ago. I rented a condo in Sunny Isles for a month for me, my wife, and our 1-year-old at the time. We traveled down there, and I spent a bit of time, a week or 10 days, playing at the Hard Rock and then playing at the Gulfstream. It was fine. And then I was looking around to see where else there's action. And it seemed that the closest other action was at the Isle Pompano Park. So one of these days, this is early June 2019. I drive down to Isle Pompano, probably about a half hour to 35 minutes from where we were staying. And this was a Saturday night.
Can I ask you a quick question? Is the Isle Pompano the place where you walk in and there's like an escalator? It's like a mall and you have to go up or something like that?
There's no mall, but there's an escalator
Okay.
up to the second floor where the room is kind of on like a podium.
I've been to that place.
Yeah,
I've been
yeah.
there. Okay.
It's a nice looking room.
Yeah. Okay.
Everything was fine, as at first impression. So I sit down, play the 2-5 game for a couple of hours. I see a 5-10 game go off, and it seems attractive. So I jump in there. Long story short, I play there on a Saturday, I win $1,000, leave. I'm like, oh, this place is pretty nice. I come back the following day, Sunday. I sit down, I play, I do well. At the end of the night, I cash out. I remember it well. So for $1,000 buy-in, I cash out at $26.84. And what I do is at the cage, I had this kind of a business card holder, a big size, kind of an oversized business card holder where I used to keep my big bills. So I stick the big bills in there, and after 2 winning nights, it's getting pretty thick. And then I put the small bills in my other pocket with my car keys. And I grab a coffee for the road, and I head out. I get in my car, I drive out through Pompano, I get on the highway.
About what time is this at, by the way?
This is around midnight,
okay.
Sunday night.
Okay. Yeah.
I don't remember if this is I-95 or Florida Turnpikes, but I get down to Sunny Isles and get off. And I'm driving down Collins Avenue towards my condo, and I'm looking at the strip malls that are on one side of the road, and I see that some of the places are open. And for some reason, I wanted to see, what else is open here at midnight on a Sunday, because it's kind of a residential neighborhood, and there's not a lot of stuff that's open late. I'm like, well, let me take a peek, and I pull into one of these shopping strips on the opposite side from the beach on Collins Avenue. And I drive one by cafe and it's open, and I drive by another restaurant. I think it's called Sultan Place or something. It looks like a Russian restaurant. I'm like, well, that place is open, and they have a little menu book on the podium in front of the door. And I'm thinking, let me take a quick peek at the menu, just for reference. So I drive by the restaurant, pull into the parking space right in front of that strip, maybe a few spaces down from the restaurant. I get out and I start walking towards the front of the restaurant, towards the door, and I hear screaming from behind me. I turn around. There's a car standing angled at me. Passenger door's open. Black guy jumped out of the passenger side door, face covered from the nose down with a blue bandana, so I can only see his eyes and his hair. Average height, kind of skinny. Has a shotgun pointed at me.
That's got to be pretty freaky. I mean, that would
yell, start screaming, get everything out of your pocket, put your wallet on the ground, step back with the random expletives, etc. A driver, another black guy, sticking his head out of the driver's side of the car, which is sort of away from me. He keeps yelling for my phone. So the first thought that ran through my mind was, motherfucker, I have too much money on me. Because normally I don't carry as much, but I had $5,000 in my pocket. Normally I might have half that amount, but I won $1,000 on Saturday night, and I won $1,600, that day. And I said, that's almost like as much as I would have like walking around in my pocket. That was the first thought. And the second thing is I just had the sense that like they knew that I had money. So I just reach into the pocket where the money was, put it down on the pavement, raise my hands up, and I just keep back off onto to kind of the walkway onto the curb. The other guy keeps yelling for my phone. I tell him I point towards my car, and I'm now like good 5 parking spaces away from my car. I'm like, the phone is in the car. They're like, oh, this and that, fuck it. Grab the wallet, jumps in the car, peels out through the shopping center and out the back of the shopping center, gone.
The phone thing is actually interesting too, because a lot of people have phones that could be, upwards of $500 or $1,000. We don't think of that necessarily. Upwards of $500,000 on them. So they would. I mean, it's not like they're trying to prevent you from calling the police. They probably they look at that as something that's valuable. But as gamblers and probability would say, you go into this, and it's interesting. Like we play poker. Like the first thing that jumped to my mind was, it's fairly obvious to me. There's like a 99.99% chance that these guys are scoping you out at the casino. Whereas if you were to ask someone like in the regular population, they might be like, "Oh, you're just so unlucky. It was just random." But how often, out of how many people get robbed by shotgun in a driveway at midnight, you look at the probability of that happening, and then you have to line that up with the probability of you actually coming from a place where you had a bunch of cash on you. It has to be that they scoped you. I mean, there's no doubt about it.
So there are answers. So there are answers to all of your questions that I'm going to get into next, right? So I'm looking around. So the first thing that came to my mind is there was a white Bentley sitting in front of the door of the restaurant. So my first thought was, and the way that the car was angled when he jumped out of it, it almost looked like he was sitting in the parking space waiting for the white Bentley owner to come out. But instead, he got me. That was the first thing that came to my mind. Second thing is, I'm looking around the parking spot. There's a guy sitting on the parked car, and I see like his face is lit up, like with a phone in front of him. And it looked to me like he was like video recording the entire thing. And at the same time, a waiter is coming out of the restaurant. Just as they pull away, waiter comes out to take the little podium with the book to bring it back inside, because I guess they were getting to close time. And I'm a bit shocked, right? I'm no worried. Like, at no point I was sort of like concerned for my life, but I was just shocked. I'm like, I don't know what the hell is going on in this place. I'm leaving. So real quick, I jump in my car and I drive away. Drive to my building, which is a couple of traffic lights down the road, pull into the valet area, tell the guys at the valet, they're like, you got to call the cops. So I get on the phone, I call the cops. Cops come to the building. 4 or 5 cars. I tell them real quick what happened. They're like, well, why did you leave the site? I'm like, I don't know what the fuck is going on over there. I just wanted to get out of there as soon as possible.
Still probably kind of dark too, right? And it's like 1 a.m.
Yeah, yeah. And there's a guy sitting in the car with the phone. And it was very weird.
They said that to you in an accusatory way, or they were just
No,
wondering?
no, they just
Oh,
asked, "Why did you
oh.
leave? Why didn't you call from there? Why are you calling from here?"
I've found like in different types of crimes, not even just robbery, that sometimes the cops aren't the easiest to deal with. It really depends on the situation. Like whether they're overworked or they consider it like not a priority. I've just seen certain situations. I was involved in a hit and run actually where it was the same thing. They had a very, very bad attitude. That's the only reason why I asked, because I would have done the same thing. I would have got the fuck out of there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
maybe their default approach is skepticism, which
Maybe.
I
Yeah.
probably could understand.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyhow,
Yeah.
well, I'm like, I don't feel like getting in the car and driving over there. Like I'm a little shook up, right? Anyway, I jump into the cop car. We drive back down there. It's a few blocks, a couple of blocks. Go back down there. They go in. They talk to the store owner. So the guy sitting in the car with the phone turned out to be a boyfriend of one of the waiters.
Okay.
He was waiting for his waiter boyfriend to get off the shift so they can leave.
So he's just like
Right.
fucking around on his phone. He's not taking
Right.
the right.
Right.
Okay.
Didn't
Yeah.
say anything.
Yeah.
No one inside the restaurant saw anything.
Uh huh.
So that was quite useless. So they take me back. The cop basically said, "Hey, look, you got a 1-year-old sleeping upstairs. You're lucky that nothing happened. It's just money, this and that. We'll investigate, etc." But that was more or less the end of it. They drove me back to the apartment. The following day, the detective reaches out. Sunny Isles police detective reaches out. We meet. Here's the summary. They got the surveillance video from the restaurant. The security camera of the restaurant is on the canopy above the front door, pointing sideways, so that you can see people coming in and out the door. So all it shows, and it shows the walkway. So all it shows is me backing into the shot with my hands up. It doesn't show anything else. But they got the surveillance video from the highway. They said, "Yeah, it's Black Infinity. They were following you from the casino."
You told them it was a black Infinity, I assume, or it was a
I
black
said
car.
it looked like dark blue to me. I told them dark
Right.
blue. They said it was Black Infinity. Followed you from the casino.
Mhm.
It was either a stolen car or stolen license. I think it was a stolen license plate
Mhm.
from some older guy stolen a couple of months back. It was reported. He obviously never found, but they had it. That's what it was. All I had in the wallet was cash, 5,000, and my driver's license and one credit card, just like to pay for meals when I'm playing. Right? Cancel the card, the license, etc. Then they told me to come in. They asked me questions at the police department in Sunny Isles. They keep telling me, the cops told me right away, they tell me things like that don't happen in Sunny Isles. Like, so we take it serious, this and that, because this is not that type of neighborhood. I'm like, all right, well, it just fucking happened. So here it is. So the detectives were working it. Eventually, so they said, now they're going to go back and get the surveillance from the casino as well. So another day or two passes. They get the surveillance from the casino. The detective describes it this way. So apparently, someone spotted me and noticed me on Saturday night, because on Sunday, when the guy came into the parking lot, came into the casino, right, the Infinity, the first thing he did was run around the parking lot looking for my car, right, to see where I was parked. My car is pretty easy to spot. At the time, I had a blue C-Class with a car seat in the back. After he found my car, then he went inside.
Yeah, and I want to give a little bit of background too about the Isle Pompano. You can correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know how many games they had going there, but it's a lot smaller than, say, like Seminole Hard Rock. Do you remember how many tables they had when you were playing? It's got to be less than 10, right?
The room is probably 20, 25
Right.
tables. There were, call it four to five games running, and 1 5-10 occasionally.
So if you kind of take a step back and look at the background of this, you've got a smaller room, which is probably going to be mostly regulars. And I think there were like, I don't know if there's slots there or what, or little casino games, or like, other types of poker games. Or obviously there's like low stakes games, but you have a casino that's like a small room, and all of a sudden there's like an out of towner, maybe with a lot of chips, or somebody catches you cashing out. So then it's a situation where these guys sort of scoped you out. Looked like that there was actually some planning, possibly somebody that was there from the night before saw you again and then called in like buddies and was like, this guy has a lot of money. This is eerily similar to a couple of different situations where people were set up over the course of multiple nights, like that kid in TCH Austin that got shot, that used to like post all his chips on Instagram. This was maybe, I don't know, 5 years ago, if not more. Actually, it was like when I had just met my wife. I remember recording it in 2018. that was a setup. That was an inside job. And there was another situation where I've heard multiple stories of people being robbed after leaving the casino, them going actually back and tracing what had happened in the casino, and the people that they saw on surveillance in the casino were also following the people around sort of in the casino, like following them into the bathroom, like in, not the most obvious way. So there was some, obviously you were being watched. It was kind of far from random. Not that that necessarily matters. I think one of the things that we might be able to take away, we'll talk about here in a second, is how prevalent this might be and what we can do, to protect ourselves going away from the casino. So is there anything more to add here too?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then obviously what happened was there was somebody on the inside, right? So someone on the inside on Sunday, when they saw me come back in, they put some kind of a text message or a call out, hey, this guy's back, right? So then these guys showed up, found my car. Obviously they were watching me. As you said, it's a second floor poker room. It's kind of on the podium, so it's very visible. There's a bar on one side where it's sort of the racetrack side. The cage is on the side of the room. It's kind of wide open. It's very visible, so you could see people cashing out at the window. They're not sort of visibly protected at all. So then when I walked out, I guess they followed me out. Two things I noticed while I was driving, which I noticed. I didn't give it any significance, but when I was driving out of the parking lot, I was trying to get out the same way that I came in. And when I went down the road around the racetrack, that gate was closed. So I had to, I don't remember. Somehow it was closed. There were cones there or something. So I had to make a U-turn to turn around. And then I noticed there was a car following me that also had to U-turn. And because the gate was closed, well, I figured somebody else doesn't know that this way's out is closed. Didn't think it was a big deal. And then as I was driving down the road towards the highway, I did notice at a traffic light where I stopped, a car behind me stopped at an unusually large distance, right? Because I see their headlights, right? And again, I'm like, that's a super safe driver. He stopped 2 or 3 car lengths away from me behind me. So again, I shared that with the detectives. I shared that with the cops. So I said, well, look, I was talking to the detectives. I'm like, this is obviously casino's responsibility. Is there a conversation that we have with casino? Because, it would be nice to get some sort of restitution here, because they have some sort of a ring running out of that poker room or casino that follows people out. Here's what the detective told me. The detective told me, he says, yeah, these people do this all the time, like on daily basis. They follow people out and they try to rob somebody. It rarely works, right? Because people pull into a hotel or valet parking or somewhere else, right? Or they lose them on the way. Rarely works, but they try it all the time. It's a constant, ongoing operation. So I think that's important for people to understand that place is a hive, right? And they have a constant crime ring running out of there. I later did some research and I found that there was somebody robbed 3 years prior, also an out-of-towner, returning to his rented B&B, coming out of the aisle, robbed for $8,000 or $9,000 near their rental outside the house. So anyhow, I went back to the casino, tried to talk to the security. Talked to the security shift manager. The guy's name was Josh Story. Eventually, I had a phone conversation with their head of security. A guy's name was Bob Krug. I still have their business cards. I'll summarize the conversation. The head of security literally tells me, and this is a quote, he says, "There's nothing that happened here."
You mean the person in the casino said that there's nothing that happened
That's
here?
security. Yeah, that's the head of security. That's literally his direct quote from the head of their security. I said, okay, I was robbed in Sunny Isles. These people are sitting around all day watching your poker players and following them home or wherever they're going. So I got no satisfaction out of the casino. They weren't interested in discussing any kind of compensation or restitution or anything else whatsoever.
Just on that note too, and we'll touch about this too, and obviously it's a terrible thing it's a terrible thing that happened to you, and you would think that they would be more sympathetic, and maybe they wouldn't necessarily put it in that manner. I will say though, obviously I'm sure that you heard the whole thing with the chip theft thing from YouTube from a couple of weeks ago, a popular video when I was talking about how somebody can steal chips off your table, right? And the casino won't do anything about it because if it's an inside job, there's no way to know, right? And they can get ripped off. I think it's actually a similar thing here. It's actually a similar thing where you have a situation where what are they going to do? I mean, besides being more compassionate, because they kind of open themselves up to being taken advantage of if they were to somehow make restitution on, especially something that happened outside of their walls.
Well,
Now,
except the fact that I did sign a sworn affidavit with Sunny Isles Police Department that says that I had $5,000 stolen from me, and they have determined that it's people who followed me from the casino that stole.
yeah, but that doesn't. I understand that, but that
I mean,
doesn't. That's
but
like a proof.
that's the only actual proof that I have,
But
right?
that, yeah, but a sworn affidavit isn't proof of anything. So, you know, I mean, Rudy Giuliani, and what's her name, Sidney Powell, signed affidavits left and right. The point that I'm making is that I can kind of see the casino's point of it now, where the casino's responsibility comes into play, and where you would like to see them at least step up is whether it had something to do with maybe, parking lot security, or if there was a lack of security, which is what happened with my buddy Joey Sal from Ohio at the WSOP, because the security was just so poor, and they had no ability, I think at the time, to have security boxes. This was a couple of years ago, the WSOP. Something like that, I think the casino's responsibility is to improve the entire situation. This one's kind of tough, unless there are things that I don't know that go on where they could have made it more secure. But basically, you're telling me that these guys were in a public casino, sort of scoped you out, and then followed you back. And obviously, it's not your fault, but it's also not the casino's fault. The point that I'm making is that I think what this brings out in the casino's reaction and how that they are handling the situation is not surprising to me. And as people, whether you're recreational players, part-time players, full-time players, as an individual, you should expect the casino to not really be a part of this equation, the safety equation, and take the necessary steps on your own, whether that's right or wrong, to think about how you want to protect yourself when you're leaving these establishments. And I'm not talking about you, Ilya, I'm talking about all of us, because this is where the robbery is going to happen. This is pretty much where 95% of the robberies that I have heard of is going to happen. It's going to happen in between you leaving the casino property and your home or wherever you're driving to.
And certainly these guys got lucky, because I could have just as easily just driven straight to the building, pull into the valet area, and they would just keep going, right? They wouldn't follow them in there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And obviously I've driven many, many times, away from a casino. I have never, sometimes I would get a little bit complacent, especially when I was playing full time, or a little bit lazy, where I wouldn't necessarily pay attention. A lot of times, especially when I was playing in Texas, I always paid attention. And here I always pay attention, although you don't really hear about that many robberies.
No, I pay attention everywhere.
Yeah.
I have my head on a swivel anywhere.
And I would say that if you suspect that somebody is following you, one of the best things that you can do is actually drive to a police station, right? Pop into Google Maps, police station. Obviously, there's police stations all around. Because driving to your house is not the best option either. I've heard many people being robbed right outside their house. And God forbid, somehow, if somebody got into your house, or if they have been scoping you, let's say that you were a regular in the area, like when I was playing at Commerce, like all the time, and they really were scoping you a lot, they might know where you live if it went that deep. Because I had heard about one guy got robbed when they were waiting. There was like a team of guys, one that was at the casino and one that was at his house. They didn't go into his house, but they robbed him outside his house. So driving home, if you think that you're getting followed, is also not the best idea. Now, there's a couple of things that I think that can mitigate this. I don't mean to sound like really, I'm going to be as honest as possible. I don't mean to sound like too straightforward or incredibly crude, but I think at this point, as poker players, we need to mentally prepare ourselves where something like this can happen to us. There's a real possibility that something like this can happen to us. And if we think and talk about it now, I think the incident in itself, if it does happen in the future, would be actually less traumatic, as opposed to never even considering it and then it happening. And some people, it might have a real effect on them past whatever money is being stolen, right? Like a real traumatic effect. But if we know that this is a possibility, then what can we do to mitigate these things? And one of the smartest things that I ever heard from Bobby Hoff I said, if you were a professional player, never leave the casino empty-handed. Depending on how large you play, and for you guys who are 2-5 guys or something like that, maybe this would be anywhere between like $300 and $700. Maybe if you're playing high stakes, maybe it would be like 1,000 to 1,500, something like that. Especially if you're having a big winning night, do not leave empty-handed. Have some money, a small amount of money on you, because you might run into a situation where if you have zero on you, they think that you're hiding it, and you could lead to bigger problems. I mean, anybody, if you're going to have a shotgun pointed at you like you did, Ilya, I'm sure you would have been happy with the resolution if you had like $400 or $500 that they would have just taken it and run off, right? Like that would have been a happy resolution. Obviously, you had 5,000. I'm just saying that's something to be said. So if I was a regular, I would not leave totally with zero, but I would use a lot of player banks. I don't know at Parx if they have boxes or anything like that.
Yeah, they got security boxes, yeah.
Do they have player banks there?
No.
So, I mean, I know in California they have player banks, and I always think that player banks are very, very convenient and easy. A lot of people get all the concern because they're like, oh, it's on the grid. First of all, it's not even on the grid. I've explained this many, many times. I've explained how there was a guy at Commerce that had like a lien, one of the rare times where the IRS actually had a lien and got some, whatever, I don't know if it's a warrant or whatever. They went in to look at his security box, but they didn't go in and look at his player's bank, because the player's bank money is kind of considered like chips in play. They don't even know about it. So it's not like it's an actual bank account. The casino considers it like chips in play. I find it very, very convenient. And the player's bank is just like a lot of places will offer you this. You just go and say, hey, can you deposit these chips? And then they keep like, digital record. You come back the next day, you withdraw them.
Hey, look, by the way, you have given this same advice 8 years ago. So I know, at least, I followed you long enough. I've heard it from you before. And certainly I've heard all these stories from the past about the first. So which was, as to your point, I was not sort of completely caught off guard, at least sort of psychologically and emotionally. Right. And I wasn't distraught emotionally about it. Now, to be fair, do I look behind me as I'm walking through dark parking lots now? Much more for the past 3 years than I have done over the previous 30 years.
Right. Yeah, so no, absolutely.
That's have a lasting effect. But what are you going to do? One thing I wanted to mention back to the casino's responsibility. For all I know, it could be a dealer that's watching the players and texting like, "Hey, this guy's back here." We don't know who the inside man is. And I don't know that an investigation can get to that level, but those are the things that I wanted to talk to the casino security about.
So if you obviously, and I know Ilya, but like one of the original subscribers, right, of mine, and I probably listened to me. You've listened
2009, 2010.
Right. So I'm gonna, and I know you'll know the answer to this. What do you think? What is my general opinion of casino management? Casino higher ups.
It's correct that it's sort of some of these people wouldn't get quality jobs in other industries that require a little more intellectual horsepower.
Is it correct? Would it be accurate to say that my view of casino management and the casino industry is pretty much as low as it could possibly be in an industry?
It has always been rather low.
Yes, it has always been rather low. So I'm not making excuses for them. I just have no faith that they're really ever going to do anything. If we can't get the correct games, and there are things that go on that are game related that we can't get fixed because they have no fucking clue. Put it this way, like, I'm not one of these guys that, you take one extreme and say, oh, it's the player's fault. The guy that got robbed because he should have protected himself. He should have been packing a gun. Why wasn't he packing a gun? Like, that's one extreme. But on the other hand, we just have to deal with the fact that most casinos are entirely incompetent, or their security in their casinos are entirely incompetent. And sure, we can complain about it, but I don't think anything's going to change. So let's take individualistic, proactive steps on our end to do what we can do, to protect ourselves. Sure, it could have been a dealer. And again, I'm by no means defending the casino, but you kind of continue to go down that route where even if it was a dealer, the casino still isn't going to be liable, right? I mean, it's because the guy's just an employee. And I mean, the only time where literally you might be able to hold the casino like liable, where the casino might owe you money and you could sue the casino, is if somehow someone that was working at the casino in the casino robbed you. Maybe while they were still working, like if they were on the clock and they robbed you in the casino, that would probably literally be where, unless there are laws that they are breaking about how secure their area has to be. Like there's a law that says if you want to have a card room in Florida, you have to have this and this and this in the parking lot, and they didn't have those things, and maybe you were robbed in the parking lot, then there could probably be a liability. In your case, I don't see it at all. You would think that they, like I said, that they would be that they would have a better, that they would be more understanding, and at least maybe even try to fake it where they were going to do something instead of basically just brushing you off, right? Which is what it kind of sounded like.
And by the way, I had told them then. I didn't mention this. I had told them that I'm gonna make the story public, and this is it's. I mean, it's naturally bad for business. Well, I'm talking to the head of security. He doesn't care. He doesn't care that it's bad for business. It's not. The revenue line is not his responsibility, and the bottom line is not his responsibility.
Yeah,
And
that would be, and that is not, obviously it's a terrible, it's a very, I was going to say unfortunate, but it's worse than that. It's terrible customer service. But is it surprising to me that's been around forever? No, it's just not surprising. Just like if I was going to try to explain to some random poker room manager how the way that their bad beat jackpot set up doesn't make sense. Like I tried to at the bike when they put in a bad beat jackpot for PLO, and I was like, this is going to be hit. Like you can't really do it this way. And I was trying to explain to her the game of PLO because she literally didn't even know how to play the poker room manager. She didn't care. This is the type of stuff that I've dealt with. So it's just not surprising to me.
I figured if this gets brought up to them once every few years, it wouldn't be too much to ask of them to sort of make it right and take some responsibility and to make some sort of restitution. It's not like they have people trying to exploit this, and every other month someone comes over with a Sunny Isles police detective and a robbery report. But I guess they were not interested.
I will say, Ilya, one thing that I wouldn't have done if I were you, and again, this is nothing to do with your fault, but I'm just talking about like looking back at that night. So if I had a lot of money on me, or what I considered a lot of money, it might have been, for me personally, it would be a larger figure than 5,000. So let's say, but I would never walk out there with like a shit ton. But let's say like I had 10 or 15,000 in my pocket, right? An amount that I don't usually walk out with. When I walk out of casinos with a lot of money, and I think this was your case too, where I know that I have like an inordinate amount of money, that this is not normal for me, especially if I am in a different location than normal. Like if I'm out of town, I never stop anywhere in between the casino and where I'm going to the point where, because one of the other things that I heard, some of the more common places to be robbed, and this happened at Commerce, is that people would stop for gas. And your story actually brings this up, and I didn't really think about it this way, where this might be situations where this stuff happens all the time, where people are followed back, but they only get robbed like 1 out of 10 times.
Yeah.
Like who knows? Like maybe it's only a situation where if somebody stops and there is an opportunity to rob him, it actually happens.
That's right.
So if you're walking out of a casino and it's outside of your routine in terms of whether it's a location or in terms of you usually don't have this much money on you, because I had always planned, because I always think about this, like, I kind of know if I'm going to be walking away from a casino with a lot of money, if it's not planned like at Commerce, I would know, I'm going to plan on depositing money tomorrow, so I'm going to take a bunch of money out. I would always make sure that I had enough gas to get home. I mean, I know that sounds really, really easy, but in your particular case on that night, I would not have stopped. I would have just because it's just kind of in my mental routine, I wouldn't have stopped at a restaurant, even if it looks like it's sort of a nice area. And your story makes me think about this even more, because I do wonder how often people are just being followed,
According to Sunny Isles police detective, it happens all the time, right? Just like you just described. And by the way,
you mean they think that people are being followed all the time? You mean
they know this is police, right? This is their business, right? They know that people are being followed all the time, and every once in a while, those guys succeed and they get to rob somebody and steal some money, right? This isn't the success rate on the follow against the robbery is not anywhere near 100%, right? It's very low.
Well, it could be extremely low. I mean, it really is something to think about. Yeah.
Right. That's how it works, right? So two things. To your point, yes, obviously all you're saying is obvious and common sense. To be fair, the Isle Pompano is the neighborhood is kind of sketchy. And I noticed that driving over there for the first time, like, this area is kind of not great, right? But it's a racetrack, got a big parking lot. It seemed to be busy, so there were a lot of cars and people around. So it seemed okay. I wouldn't be stopping with any amount of money. I would just wouldn't be stopping anywhere in that area. But by the time I was 35 minutes away, in the middle of Sunny Isles, in one of these like luxury shopping strips, I did not feel any risk sort of getting out of my car in that neighborhood, which is sort of was my
Well,
downfall.
and I think that can be deceptive because when you take a step back, right, it doesn't matter how nice wherever you're stopping is, because where you're coming from is not nice, and you might be being followed. So, which is
Right,
what happened, right?
if I was coming back from Maryland Live, right, where we were, right, which is 2.5 hours away from my house, right, and then let's say Maryland Live wasn't a great neighborhood. Well, by the time I drove 2.5 hours and I'm near my house, I don't think back. Well, maybe I'm being followed. Maybe there's a risk of me getting out of my house, getting out of my car in front of my house with a lot of money because I drove out of a casino 2.5 hours earlier.
Oh, right. I mean, I think you're right. Like the further you're driving, the less of a chance. But I mean, this place wasn't far away from the casino, though, right? It was 20
Well,
minutes.
no, it was 35 minutes
Oh,
away from
okay.
where I was staying. So it was a pretty lengthy drive, you know,
Okay.
which
Yeah.
is why by the time I got to Sunny Isles, it didn't even cross my mind.
Right. Okay. So what you're saying this setup is like you're going from a sketchy area to pretty far away in a nice suburb, basically.
Right.
So I got you.
That's what
So
happened, right?
that's why your guard was let down. Yeah, I can see that for sure. That makes sense.
Right.
Like
I mean,
you wouldn't have stopped at a restaurant 5 minutes away from the
no,
casino.
that's the point. And I wouldn't even stop at a gas station, right?
Right.
Just
Okay.
like you described. I
Yeah.
wouldn't
Yeah.
stop anywhere in that neighborhood
Right.
within,
Right.
before I got on the freeway.
Yeah. No, I mean that definitely makes a lot of sense.
So I
That
wanted people to know, that the place, it's been 3 years. I doubt that anything has changed. So people need to know that that's a hornet's nest. And given other options in the area, take it, buyer beware.
well, I just think that it might be the same like that everywhere. I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I don't know anything. I mean, maybe people can comment in Florida, but I mean, is it more of a hornet's nest than Seminole Hard Rock? I mean, if you're going to be followed back internally from a casino because you have a lot of money, does it really matter with a casino? Because again, from the Isles point of view, it's not like you were robbed. I would look at this a lot more of a casino issue or be mad at the casino if it happened on their property. If they had an unsecure parking lot and you were robbed in the parking lot and it had happened before, that's where I'd be like, wow. And that's what I'd be like, fuck this casino. This happened. It's happened before. It's happened later. They don't give a shit. That's what happened at TCH too. It happened in the parking lot. But your case, I don't know if it's. I mean, these guys like are just. There's no proof that they are employees, right? So what you were just turned off by the way that the casino handled the situation?
Well, no, I was turned off by the fact that operate. Obviously, there's an operation there, and that operation sort of festers and is allowed to continue unimpeded from what I can tell, year after year.
Okay, so you think that this has just been going
I think
on
it's just an
internally?
ongoing issue there. And by the way, when I had a conversation with the detectives in Sunny Isles, they sort of hinted at me that, let's say, the Hard Rock Seminole, because it's Indian,
Mhm.
like people don't want to fuck with them
Oh, because they have their own.
because it's Seminoles, and they don't want to go after their customers. So maybe these rings, they operate at the Isle, but they don't go in and operate on Seminole property.
Right, and it's also kind of nicer. I don't know, yeah, for whatever but there's a bunch of other smaller rooms around,
It's
not just like the
it's
Isle,
quote
right?
unquote sort of political, political, right? So
Right.
they know who to stay away from and where they can spread.
You mean you think that there might actually be more heat if they rob somebody from? Yeah. I mean that could be. Too. The other thing too that I meant to mention in terms of a response is if you do have the option to color up. That was one of the things too that I would do. God, fucking Encore. Every time I think about Boston Harbor Encore, it pisses me off. Shout out to my buddy Josh. How ridiculous like their setup is right now. I mean, and it's not just me because you literally can't cash out in the poker room. There's one cage in the entire casino, and you might have to wait in line with like 100 different people that weren't playing poker. And there's a lot of riffraff in Boston because it's outside of Chelsea. Like, it's not like a win in Las Vegas. So, you can kind of picture like walking downstairs the rack at $10,000 out in front and dealing with this riff for 100 people in line. The reason why I bring that up is because, sometimes I would walk away from casinos if the line was super, super long and I didn't want to wait or for whatever reason, but I would still attempt to color up to big chips. Wearing most jeans and stuff have like a change pocket, like a small pocket. So that would be like one of the techniques that I would use if I wasn't depositing money, is I would color up to the largest amount of chips as possible and take some money back. This is kind of a tough question, Ilya, but like when you handed them the money, right? This might be a tough question. When you handed them the money, it was just like in a wad, right? Like you just handed.
So it was a business card holder,
right,
the
right,
one that
right,
folds
right,
over,
right.
right? And it was stuffed, like it was like ripping at the seams because it was full as it ever gets, right? Because normally, I don't carry as much on me. So I just left it on the pavement and I just backed away.
The reason why I bring that up, and this would just be pure speculation from both of our parts, is if you play that out and you only had, say, like $800 in that business card wallet or $1,000, I don't think it would have made any difference. So that's why I'm talking about having some money on you, but not like, look, you don't want to lose your life over 5,000 either, right? Give the money. You made the right decision, right? I'm just saying that, hey, if you have some money, enough money where it's not going to cause an issue. Obviously, like I said, if you had if these guys said, hand over your money, and you said, no, I don't have any money, you can see how much of whether you did or you didn't. Let's say, Ilya, you actually had a box there or what, I don't know. I don't know if they have fucking players banks there, but let's say you legitimately started a players bank there and these guys were scoping you out. And instead of going home with the money, you deposited the money in a players bank and you literally didn't have any money on you. And they thought that you did because they were scoping you out. And picture to that night, and the guy's got a shotgun in front of you, and you said, I don't have any money. Do you see the problem that might have caused?
Yeah, no, listen, as I said, all of that is common sense, obvious. So what you're talking about is a slightly more advanced security setup where you're prepared ahead of time and you have kind of a fake wallet, and then the bulk of your money is elsewhere. I was not prepared for the scenario, right, adequately, right? And I didn't think that was necessary at the time, even though, as I said, you've relayed some of these stories in the past, and I have heard them from other sources as well.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that believe me, I'm not trying to put the fault on you at all. I'm just saying.
And by the way, if I had a losing night, I don't know if they would follow me or not, right? But if I ended up having $1,500 in my pocket instead of $5K, maybe I would just write it off. Maybe I wouldn't even call the cops. Maybe I just say, oh fuck it, what are they going to chase down? $1,500 in cash in my driver's license? Then they're never going to find it. I would just write it off and then move on.
I think what you want to bring out that you weren't really happy with the way that the aisle handled it, and you kind of want to warn people that this type of, whether you call them following rings or something like that, might be still going on there. So if you play there, be careful. Yeah. Is there anything else that you'd like to add?
I think that's all to the story, but I wanted to share it. As I said, I was initially going to do a detailed write-up on 2+2 just to give publicity to it. I never got around to it. This is my best opportunity to get it out there. By the way, to this day, no one knows about this incident except my wife. Even my parents don't know. I haven't told anybody because this isn't something, like you said, this is something that I'm proud of, right? It's kind of an unfortunate incident, and I wanted to just kind of keep it to myself.
Well, I mean, I understand it. Can you imagine, like, when I was first starting to play professionally, obviously you and I are much older, but let's say, my parents were very skeptical when I was in my early to mid 20s, right? About gambling. If you make money gambling, get a real fucking job, right? Can you imagine, like, if I got robbed at that time? Just like, I wouldn't want to tell them.
It wasn't even about that. It was more about like it's on need to know basis, right. And they do not need to know.
Right. You don't want them to worry too. Right?
No one needs the extra stress.
Yeah, exactly.
As I said, my closest friends don't know to this day, and they don't listen to your stuff, so they won't find out until I tell them.
By the way, I had asked Michael G when I was at Parx, right, a couple weeks ago. I just assumed, for the most part, because it's true, like 95%, like, casinos for the most part are in shitty neighborhoods. And I was like, because I had stayed across the street at what was the Holiday Inn, and it's now called the Fox, and I would highly recommend people don't stay there. I'm not even like that prissy when it comes with hotels, but this is the very first hotel where I don't know how this is possible because I didn't think this works this way. I only had 8 minutes of hot water each day. I was like, what is going? So the first night, the first day, I showered, and I felt after about 8 minutes, I felt the hot water go, like it turned into cold water. I'm like, what the fuck? And then me knowing sort of how this stuff works, usually like the entire building shares like a hot water tank. So I figured like the hot water went out for the entire hotel. So whatever, I got ready, walking down, and Mike picked me up. And I was expecting like everybody to be like, oh, the hot water's out. And then I had asked the front desk, did people complain about the hot water? No. So then I was like, man, that's really strange. And then the second day, I was prepared. I was like, is there possible that like this room could be hooked up to its own water tank? Or it just didn't make any sense to me. And it happened again. You said it's impossible or possible?
Impossible.
I didn't think that, but then I was talking to somebody else who knows about this, where they said it could have been like a patch leak. Something could have happened with that room where there actually was. I don't. Anyways, it was like on a fucking timer.
Well, in the morning, when everyone goes to the shower at the same time, if it's like between 7 and 9 o'clock, then 3 other people jumped in, and there's not enough hot in the pipe to go around. That can happen.
Yeah, but not at not specifically the same amount of time. Anyways, the point is the Fox Inn at Chase kind of sucks. And then Miles told me to stay at the Courtyard or something. But the reason why I'm getting to this is I just assumed that the Parx would be in a shitty area. But Mike said that it's not. Like it's in a suburb, a nice suburb, Bensalem.
Yeah.
Is that true?
Yeah, I mean it's yeah, that's right. I mean it's Bucks County. It's a good neighborhood. It's always been a decent neighborhood. After I graduated college, I had an apartment in Bensalem for 4 years. A mile down the road from where the casino is now. I mean, they built a casino in my backyard. I've lived within 15-minute driving radius of Parx for the past 30 years. So,
and usually they don't build casinos in
nicer
areas.
It's a racetrack. Again, it's a racetrack
right.
that was built in the 50s or 60s.
By the way, do they still race there?
Yeah, they race every other day.
I mean, Mike, sometimes, I mean, he's so knowledgeable about some things, and he's such a great guy. Sometimes, like, he's gonna laugh at this. I was like, Mike, do they still race here? And he's like, oh, I don't know. I was like, how do you not know? Don't you come here like every day for the past 5 years?
You can smell the horses walking into the
That's
building.
why I said to him, I said, I knew when they were still racing at horses at Hollywood Park, I knew because there were so many flies inside because of the stables. You just knew. Of course, that's now.
When you sit in the poker room, every once in a while, somebody has the TV on the simulcast with the broadcast of the races from across the parking lot.
right.
It says Parx.
But anyways, just to wrap that up, though, like for example, Parx is in Bensalem. It's a nice area, right? It doesn't necessarily stop you from having this happen there either.
By the way, you may not be aware of the story. A year and a half ago or 2 years ago, after we reopened after lockdowns, there was a gentleman from New Jersey, a recreational player. Who I don't know. He is some kind of a pharmaceutical executive playing 10-10 and having a really big night and walking out of there with some kind of $10,000 number. Was followed for an hour into Central Jersey. They followed him into his house, broke in.
Jesus, there you go.
Shot the guy.
Well, that's my worst nightmare. Like I said, that's
with his wife and daughter upstairs.
Right. I mean, that's right. That's why if you ever suspect somebody following you, home is not any place that I would want to go. Obviously, with the family, that's a terrible
Again, it's
story.
a scenario where the guy's driving home into some kind of rural suburban Jersey. Like he's not expecting anybody to be behind him. Even though it's these one lane roads in the middle of nowhere. It's in the dark. You see a car behind you, but you don't think that someone's following. If you play poker once a month, you don't think somebody's following you from the casino to your house, which is an hour away.
That's just I mean, it doesn't really matter. It's a crazy set of circumstances. I wonder if something happened in that case where he tried to fight. From a robber's perspective, I don't know why they would want to enter his house.
The news story was that he already put it in the safe when they got in, and they were trying to get, like, by the time they broke into the house through the patio door, and they were trying to get him to get the money back out of the safe.
And something went wrong.
And something went wrong.
Like, I mean, for the most part, robbers just want the money, right? They're not trying to kill somebody. That's why it's not worth it. But there was obviously, I mean, I've heard
who knows? We weren't there, so anything can happen in that scenario, obviously.
Within the last few years, I think this has actually happened, the similar story multiple times, but I know within the last few years, there was somebody shot outside of Hawaiian Gardens and killed, like out of a movie. I don't know what happened, but the robbers, the person that they were trying to rob was the car stopped in an overpass. I don't know if they cut them off, but in an underpass, right? They shot the guy, and bills went flying everywhere. So there was a murder scene where these robbers shot this guy that they followed back from Hawaiian Gardens, and like out of a movie, there was like I don't know what the guy was. There a stack of bills went up in the air like confetti. From like 4 or 5 years ago, there was another story about another guy getting shot and killed. Like I said, to kind of wrap this in a bow, I think to mentally prepare ourselves for something like this happening and to think about these things is actually good so that it's less traumatic. But my recommendation, I would never, ever think about saying, oh, I'm going to, at least in my opinion, I don't think the answer is to carry a concealed weapon and try to fight somebody off. I just don't think it's worth it. $600 or $700 or whatever. But
Yeah, I guess the high level recommendation is consider your safety while you're on property. Consider your safety and security setup while you're, in transit,
yep,
right?
yep.
And consider your security setup when you're at home, and what that looks like in case the situation brings itself to your doorstep. So keep all that in mind.
All right, Ilya, thank you very much for telling that story and
Yep.
for the time.